mathematically perfected economy. How is that done? Well, from the explanation so far, what we are to understand is that the cause of failure is this obligation to pay against artificial sums of debt to this central banking system. And so we're obligated to pay interest and principal out of circulation, and yet most of us are maxed out on creditworthiness where we're not qualified to borrow any further. Therefore, we are not actually, there's no justification for allowing us to borrow further on a federal level, generally, to sustain a circulation. So how do you avoid the collapse of the system? I explain this in an article which is titled, If I Were President. And the basic idea is that you have to arrest this unjustifiable deflation of the system, this servicing of these artificial debts, which are, each of which are multiplied far above a principal. And so what you do to immediately arrest failure, and what I would do if I was President of the United States, for instance, is I would just announce that we were suspending all payments against all debts arising in the central banking systems of the world, whatever the central banking system. And it's basically, as Ann Minch, named it in a discussion I had with her, it's a timeout. I thought her term was very good, a timeout. And so her assessment of it was that it's a timeout, and that's exactly what it is. It isn't an evasion of our monetary obligations, because we actually need to maintain our actual just obligations in order to maintain the integrity of the circulation. And that means that we have to pay against debts that we haven't paid, because there has to be an obligation to pay the money out of circulation. Simple as that. So anyway, so this timeout, in effect, is we suspend all payments against these, mere publishers of our promissory obligations. And that arrests the deflation of the system. It immediately, likewise, to whatever degree we're paying to service our debts, it frees all that to sustain further industry. Suddenly, just with the snap of the fingers, mathematically, you are many times as liquid as you were the moment before, at least for this timeout period. So immediately we can sustain all kinds of things that we can't without any other provision whatsoever. But this is absolutely necessary to suspend these payments, to terminate them for the while, until we refinance them all under mathematically perfected economy. And what does that mean? We credit all payments of interest instead toward principal. So you might have paid already. As a woman friend of mine has recently explained to me, she's got a property it's practically a square mile in a remote area, and it was a $93,000 loan, I think, that she took out on it 20 years ago, and she's paid $90,000 of the principal off, and however much interest, I don't know, and so she owes like $3,000 only on this property, and she's been going in and out of foreclosure for the last year now. Okay, and she's going to lose it. Okay, so for $3,000 of artificial debt to a banker, which merely published her promise to pay the original owner of the property, $3,000 deficient principal, while she might have paid, let's just guess that it was, that she's paid $150,000 in interest on that mere piece of paper, which is an evidence of her debt to the original property owner. While she's paid for the property perhaps more than 2 times over for the final $3,000 in principal, that just by this obfuscated accounting that the banking system applies to this, she's going to lose her property. This is how criminal all this is. But this, so by arresting payments, we immediately free her to retain her property, and then we're refinancing her property under mathematically perfected economy, which would count all prior payments of interest instead toward principal, and she's not only paid her property off, she's paid it over multiple times. So this refinancing our debts under mathematically perfected economy immediately, likewise, makes us many times more liquid yet. The general math comes out to, across the world, as I've figured it out, it comes out to most people are going to be about 12 times as liquid as they are otherwise. So so that's basically how you convert the system into mathematically perfected economy. There's a further aspect of it where we take all of the assets that exist, and we basically want a circulation which is equal to their current value. And so there's some accounting that's done, and eventually we credit the accounts of the people in such a way as allows each of us to be self-sustaining, independent of these social mechanisms like we have Social Security in the United States, for instance. And what we intend to do by this is basically restore to a person what they would have saved under mathematically perfected economy, so that in their retired life they can sustain themselves from what in fact they have been earned and which they have been dispossessed of. So it's a complete, as practical as can be practically achieved, rectification of the crime of dispossession, which has been imposed upon us without our assent, without our knowledge, without our understanding.
Sorry, have I lost
you? Are we there?
Yep, sorry. Sorry, I was typing in the chat room. No, I was typing in the chat room there to the guys. I'm trying to answer their questions as we go here. They've been posing questions in the chat box.
Okay, great. Let's get some questions.
Oh, okay. I'm going to have to scroll way back here. Let's see. I've been doing my best to try and answer as you're going. So let's see where we go. Okay, one basic question is asking about the value of, say, my token versus the value of your token.
Well, that's what a free market's all about. In other words, the question suggests that it's disputable that you could determine the value of the token in mathematically perfected economy, which is not true if you can determine the value of a token ever. And basically what's happening, there's an article that I have on perfecteconomy.com, which is about determining the value of money or property. That article will very completely answer your question, but basically it comes down to this, so that you just hear my answer online. We do this. In other words, Vincent builds this house for me, and he says it's a $100,000 house. I take a look at it. How do I assume whether I agree or disagree with the value that he's appointed to it? He might be a conscientious person, and he says, well, Mike, just so you know, for your satisfaction, let me show you, what I spent for the materials and what the labor costs of the others that helped me build this. Well, these are my costs, and and these are the kinds of guys that worked on this, and this is the kind of skill that went into every little aspect of it, and and I'm thinking, wow, that's really good. Now, I might be a highly skilled craftsman at some other trade, and I'm maybe an extremely productive pipe welder, for instance, and I have actually long-term record of outperforming substantial crews all myself, and I don't really get paid to the extent that I'm worth, and yet I'm a prosperous fellow because I am well paid, and I look at I look at this the house that Vincent has built, and I say, well, give or take, so many of this, so many of that, I mean, $100,000 is reasonable. If I'm a real nitpicker who, is trying to worm my way through every day of life by trying to get everything for the least cent that I can pay for it, and trying to get every cent I don't deserve for everything that I want to sell. Well, I might squeal and scream and everything, and Vince might say, "Hey, Mike, why don't you bug off?" I'm not going to sell you my house for $99,000. $100,000 is my price, and I'm not going to spend 2 weeks of my damn life finagling with you. There's people that are like that, and other people I say, okay, fine, take it for $99,000. Now, why am I saying this to you in answer to your question? I'm saying this because, in truth, you're asking a question about how am I going to do something which you are doing every day, but you may or may not have a very legitimate process of accomplishing that purpose. Now, you're asking me to fill in the blanks, which I'm glad to do. I mean, I could say, all right, here's a very good method for determining the value of the house. But I'm not doing that to you, not to cop out from answering this question. I'm not doing that to you because a free market is a free market, and I believe in freedom. Well, what I'm saying is, in the end, Vincent built this house, and he's got these costs, and he does this for a living, and he knows what he needs to get for it to deliver to himself the kind of living that he needs. Now, reasonably, he's not compelled to take less than that, because each of us look at each other's work and say, well, that guy's really skilled, he might be less skilled, whatever. We make all these general deductions, which are not products of exacting methods, and we say, it's a $100,000 house. It's going to cost me $83.33 a month, or it's going to cost me $83.34 a month. What the hell's the difference?
Exactly.
And
I mean,
it's
if you're
not
talking
worth it for me to
foot.
finagle over $1,000 for 2 weeks. Absolutely not worthwhile. So, on the one hand, basically, the answer to the question then is that the methods are the same. Mm-hmm. There's no difference. You basically look at somebody else's work and you say, well, this is what I get for my work, and his work is better than mine. He produces more per hour, or he produces higher quality, and this is good work. I'm willing to pay more of the hourly volume of my work for his work because it's better work. Okay. I want that.
There's another question
or you
here.
might say, I don't want that. But you will be hard-pressed to find anyone else who will deliver it to you. Now, the difference is, however, is that under mathematically perfected economy, there is no corruption or subversion of the value of anything by the money. What's happening under usury, the central banking systems of the world, is every unit, every day, is being dedicated to servicing ever greater indebtedness than the day before. And so this means that your money isn't as spendable as it was. And so the value or the cost of this house is actually going up in time relative to the spendable portion of the money. And these are things, I guarantee you are not accounting for them in your determination of not only what you will pay for products, but whether or not you can afford to sustain this process, because you are going to incur further indebtedness as an inevitable consequence of incurring any indebtedness at all. And without indebtedness, you have no way of sustaining a system. So basically, the differences come down to this. Under mathematically perfected economy, you can determine value as you wish, subject to no other effects whatsoever. Whereas in this system, you cannot. Not only is it a fact that you cannot, but under this system, ultimately, because it engenders terminal indebtedness, it is impossible